Welcome to DNF. I'm Jessica Spatana. Spencer Hall is still out. He's still in Mongolia. We're still not really sure what he's doing there, but that's okay because we have an awesome co-host slash guest this week. He is a recurring guest of the podcast. He's Nate Saunders from ESPN. He writes about F1 and he's also the host of the Unlapped podcast. And he is our resident Brit who is going to tell us all things about the British Grand Prix, this crazy and exciting and I think great race that we all just watched, hopefully on Sunday. And just give us a little update on some of the other things that we discussed last time in terms of silly season, driver movements, things like that. So, Nate, welcome. How are you feeling now, 2 days after the race ended?
Hey, yeah, great to be on the show, and hopefully I can fill in for Spencer. Those are big boots to fill, and I'm also quite keen to know what he's doing out in Mongolia. Yeah, I'm doing good. I mean, we just had this triple header, and you always feel a little bit wiped out after that. But I've got to say, F1 out of nowhere has just turned into the most exciting thing again. It's kind of like mini 2012, sorry, 2012, 2021 at the moment, and it reminds me of the 2012 season we had where there was all these different winners. So yeah, it's great at the moment because I think last time I was on your show, I think we were talking about how boring Max winning was all the time, and that Miami maybe with Lando winning was like, hey, maybe things will change now, and they have in a big way. So yeah, really enjoying things at the moment. And I thought Silverstone was just as a race was just tremendous. You know, it was just a really yeah, just fun spectacle. And I know we're going to get into it now, but
Oh,
obviously a
yeah.
very popular outcome. And I feel like we've had a lot of those, haven't we? We've had Sainz winning. Lando winning, Leclerc breaking the curse. We had Russell winning, and now I've had Lewis win. So it's like ticking all these boxes off for people. I think it's great. So yeah, really.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about curses when it comes to Lewis and breaking the Nico Rosberg curse, but it does feel like Charles Leclerc maybe broke the curse, but also at the same time sold the rest of his season for that Monaco win because things have not been going so well
Yeah.
for him. But yeah, the last time you were on, you're right. We talked about how McLaren looked really fast and how Lando was doing so well, and now maybe a month and some change since then, it feels like there's a bunch of cars that are near the top and at least battling with the Red Bull. Although Max still has a pretty comfy lead in the drivers' championship, it has gotten a lot more interesting. And these last two weekends of the triple header with back-to-back Mercedes wins was something that maybe wasn't so much on our radar back then. So we'll definitely talk about all of that. But first, obviously, Lewis Hamilton winning is the biggest story of the weekend. He wins his home race. It's his ninth time winning at Silverstone, which is a record for the most wins at any single circuit. So can you just kind of put that in context, I guess? Like everyone knows it's a big deal, but like what does it really feel like when you're there listening to the crowd cheer him on down that final few laps? Like how are we supposed to compute this? It feels like it's something out of a movie.
Yeah, it did feel like that. I know Apple were there filming the actual F1 movie, but that felt like a better scripted kind of Hollywood drama than anything that we might get out of those guys. I think the best way to describe it is actually what happened in 2022. Do you remember we had that crazy race where there's the great Crofty commentary where it's and through
Yes.
goes Hamilton. And
Yes.
where we sit in the media center is kind of just along the pit straight. And I can still remember the noise when he went through at that point. And thing is, he was overtaken a couple of corners later, but just there's only a few drivers that you hear that for. You hear it for Max when he's in Zandvoort. You hear it for Perez in Mexico. But yeah, Lewis in Silverstone, and we are hearing it as well for Norris when he goes to Silverstone as well, like equally popular. But yeah, it's like the Lewis Hamilton Grand Prix a lot of the time. And I think coming into the weekend, it was interesting because a lot of people thought, okay, outside bet, Lewis is going to win, but it really felt like we're going to have a British winner. And if you'd asked me, if you gun to my head said who's going to win this race, if it's a Brit, I think Lewis would have probably been lower down my list. I thought maybe Russell, but definitely Lando. So for him to do it was just magnificent. And yeah, there's just something about Silverstone. You know, Lewis is this kind of this box office character, this box office driver, and something about him walking through the gates at Silverstone just kind of, I think, it's like getting a level up in a computer game. It just gives him that extra bonus. And to do it to win any race at all is pretty impressive. 9 times is just ludicrous. I mean, I've covered the Silverstone Grand Prix 8 times, and Lewis has won 7 of them. So whenever I go there, it's very rare for me to experience anything other than Lewis winning. So I think there's a lot of fans that could have gone a handful of times and only ever seen that outcome and left happy. So just an incredible achievement. And I think there's a lot of people that thought maybe they'd never see Lewis win ever again anywhere. So for him to do it and do it at Silverstone like that, I thought was just a really nice way to kind of end that run without a race win.
I do have goosebumps right now, just like thinking about the last 10 laps again, because he had to pretty much be perfect to manage the
Yeah.
tires, to keep the pace, to not make any mistakes. And he has so much experience racing on that track that I'm sure it played a role in it. But yeah, like you said, absolutely crazy finish for him, and watching him get to celebrate with Bono and with Mercedes. His last race in Silverstone with Mercedes was also pretty cool. He broke the Rosberg curse, which I
Yes,
do you
I
do you
saw that. Yeah.
can you explain the Nico Rosberg curse maybe if people aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, so and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think I'm pretty sure he always backs someone to win with a very elaborate post on social media, and it always backfires. Like he never
Yes.
backs the right person. And he's even become self-aware of the meme now, hasn't he? He's kind of he's realized it's something that people enjoy. And yeah, I saw people saying, "Oh, like Lewis's chances of winning the Silverstone Grand Prix have taken a huge knock because Rosberg's just said he's going to win." So I think that's good. Is that the first time anyone's ever done it? Is that literally the
I
first
think
win?
so. I mean,
Yeah,
I
it
I
feels like it
obviously
is.
haven't gone back
Yeah.
and checked every time, but it seemed memorable that it happened. I think there's also probably, given how popular F1 has gotten since 2021, a number of new Lewis Hamilton fans that maybe haven't seen him win the British Grand Prix
Yeah.
before, or haven't seen him even win a race, because I think it's been what, 900 and some days since his last race win.
I think it
So,
was 956 or something. And yeah, I know a couple of
right.
people like that who their first race was start of 2022. They heard about what the end of 21 was like and they watched Netflix after that. And so they were huge Lewis Hamilton fans. And they said they were in floods of tears watching that because they've been through that journey with him. And a lot of people might say, well, he's won 103 races, but weirdly, that one felt so special. And he was asked afterwards, is it the most special? And he always kind of says, I hate comparing wins to other wins. It must be difficult when you've got
Right.
so many to
When
compare
you have a
to.
lot. Yeah.
But he said it's the first one he's ever cried after, and I think that was very telling. The emotional outpouring of that was big, and yeah, I think even kind of the hardened anti-Lewis Hamilton F1 fan must have thought, okay, this is pretty neat that this guy got this one because it could be, who knows, it might be the only time he wins again. I hope we
Right.
see it with Ferrari, but with Mercedes, it would have been weird if that partnership had ended without any win. So I think now they can kind of close that chapter, happy regardless of what happens there.
Yeah, and it does seem like maybe when the season started, that seemed really likely because he was now going to be behind George Russell in a lot of respects, given like strategy calls and sort of the proprietary Mercedes information that they maybe don't want to fill him in on
Yeah,
anymore because he's leaving.
yeah.
There were accusations of sabotage that I know you wrote about. Has there been any update on that, by the way?
No, so yeah, so it was all very strange. There was an email that was
Yeah.
circulated weirdly to the same contact list that got the Christian Horner leaks in Bahrain at the start of the year. So, read into that what you will, but I think that email list was kind of distributed kind of widely, in the days after that anyway. And yeah, it was this weird email that kind of insinuated it was from a Mercedes mechanic. Mercedes have taken it to the police to look at. We haven't heard anything more about it, but yeah, I don't think Lewis had anything to do with that or that, that kind of insinuation. But I think he has felt slightly frustrated by where things are. And I kind of understand why he might not be getting, you know, the same treatment as Russell now,
Right.
because why would you if you're Mercedes? You're like, you just decided to join another team. We've got to build around this guy. So I kind of think it's part and parcel of the game. I think sabotage itself is a crazy accusation to make, but kind of favoring one guy with an upgrade before the other guy, that happens quite a lot. So I think that we might start seeing that happen, especially more as we get into the second part of the year, definitely.
Right. I mean, he's put in his notice already, and so I agree
Yeah.
with you. I think Mercedes wants to see what George Russell can do, and so as great of a weekend as it was for Lewis, George obviously had to retire his car. So could you maybe try to explain in layman's terms, or I guess like explain it to me like I'm five? Why was the Mercedes so fast this weekend? And like, what was the real key behind Lewis being able to win this race?
Well, this was a really when we had a session with Toto Wolff after the race, and we asked him exactly that. And it's really fascinating to see. We know that McLaren have closed the gap to Red Bull, over the past few races, and we know that, but by contrast to that, Mercedes have kind of been all over the place. They haven't really. I don't think they fundamentally have understood their cars that they've produced for the last two seasons. What Toto Wolff said was things they did at the start of this season started to really make sense in terms of they would make little upgrades to the car last year and it would go in a completely different direction to what the simulator was telling them, to everything they were doing. Suddenly, something clicked, and they're even understanding decisions they made last year and why they went wrong, and they're able to kind of start correcting them. So they said, we got lucky in Austria with that win. They knew that, but Toto Wolff described it as an honest win, at Silverstone. I think McLaren probably could have won, as we'll probably talk about in a bit. But yeah, Mercedes suddenly out of nowhere. I think everything it's like they've been spinning a bunch of plates for 2 years, and suddenly after a bunch of them smashing for 2 years, suddenly they've worked out how they can keep them all spinning at the same time. and we know how talented that team is. So I think it's just been trusting the process they're going on. They brought upgrades that they didn't actually think would suit Silverstone and Budapest as well as they did suit Silverstone. So the insinuation there is that come Budapest in a week's time, we might see a similar Mercedes, which is pretty exciting because we haven't really talked about Mercedes as a consistent race winner for a long time now. And suddenly they've got two back-to-back wins. Imagine if they got three suddenly out of nowhere. It would kind of be like, all right, we were joking. We joked when Toto Wolff walked in. We're like, God, this Mercedes domination is getting really boring, isn't it? Of Formula One, because he heard that so much back in the day. So I think what's happened is they've stuck to the course of development, and they've just started to slowly understand. I think the decisions they made over the past year and 2 years, whatever it was, some of them did lead them down the wrong way, but they now understand everything of where they went wrong. And it's almost when you understand where you've gone wrong somewhere, it makes it much easier to forge a path in the right direction. So I think it's just that. I don't think there's been one particular thing that has worked perfectly for them over anything else. And I think that's kind of encouraging to see. And maybe Lewis is now thinking, oh, maybe this isn't a team you want to leave at the end of the year.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I mean, it's probably too soon to tell, and there may be other reasons behind him leaving for Ferrari, including just what he said, which is that he wanted to race for them before he retired from F1 because it's Ferrari, which is understandable. But yeah, I think I'm with you, especially seeing how Ferrari continues to sort of drop the ball on race weekends too with their drivers. So if you had to choose between the winning drivers' radio messages of Lewis crying after Silverstone versus George Russell saying yabba dabba doo, which one would you pick? Which one is the better race winning radio message?
I think Lewis is all the way. I mean, the George one made me cringe pretty hard because somebody that posh shouldn't be saying yabba dabba doo. They just out of all the drivers saying it, I was like, it's probably George Russell isn't the guy. So I thought that radio message from Lewis was, I was leaving the media center to go down to the TV, the mix zone where we do all the interviews, and I remember just thinking like, damn, you don't hear that very often. So yeah, I think it was that one. But yabba dabba doo was different. In its own right.
It was so like George Russell, I think gives off very like James Bond energy. Like he kind of like dresses like it, acts like it, and that was a very Austin Powers moment. The yabba dabba doo.
It was that laced with kind of Alan Partridge, if any of your listeners know the reference, like a very, very awkward British moment. And I think the James Bond thing works. And I don't know what the translation would be for a US audience, but in the UK you have your head boy, your head prefect of a school. Who's kind of is seen as like
we've all read Harry Potter,
exactly. So George Russell kind of gives that. So him suddenly coming out and saying yabba dabba doo is a bit disconcerting actually because you don't expect him to say it.
Yeah, 10 points from Gryffindor. Okay, before we move on to other drivers at Silverstone, I wanted to ask you about some controversy, I guess you could say, about I saw a lot of British Grand Prix and British F1 fans whinging, I think you could say, at the prices this weekend at Silverstone. And this is something that we hear a lot about the US races, especially Miami. So I wanted to play this video from Spudman on TikTok. This popped up on my TikTok page. He is a food truck owner who goes to Silverstone every year. And this is him talking about the prices of his potatoes at Silverstone.
Okay, so the big question everyone's been asking, what are our prices? We're writing them on the board right now. Plain potato, £7.50. One filling is £8.50. Okay, two fillings is £9.50. Cold drinks £3.90. No tea, no coffee, no hot chocolate. We ain't doing the hot drinks. Red Bull is £4.50. Water is £3.20, I think. Teriyaki chicken and the barbecue pulled pork will be £12, and that's our most expensive one. So. Not quite as bad as I thought it was going to be. Goes without saying, same quality, same size, same potatoes that we do every day on Tamworth. So 1.5 spuds. Okay, this is the only difference. These little pots, if you want a filling in one of these, just a pot of filling, £2.50. Drop me a like and a follow. We're going to go and explore all the other units on site in the next video. Laters taters.
First of all, Laters Taters is a great outro for Spudman.
He saved himself with Laters Taters, I think.
Okay, so $7.50 for a potato. That was the price threshold, and then if you want cheese in it, it's $8.50. So is this? Did you hear people complaining about the prices this year? Is this like a real issue for F1? And is $7.50 for a potato insane?
When you put it like that, I think that's what the headline of every piece should have been. 750 for potato at Silverstone. Yeah, a lot of complaints about the price, and just generally speaking for tickets. I think for a 3-day pass, it would set you back about £400. I actually did the conversion just before I came on, which is about $520.
Hmm.
So that's it's a
Thank
lot
you
of
for
money.
doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. So because I suddenly thought
I
like,
was
hang on,
like,
I'm
I'll
going to need
never
to.
find out how many
Yeah.
dollars that is.
And I
I'll
hate,
never,
I
simply
yeah, and
never know.
I hate trying to work it out, on the spot because I can't do it. And a lot of people have complained about this for a long time. Silverstone's prices, a bit like you mentioned the US races there, Jess. I think it's the same thing. They've climbed and climbed and climbed as well, and it's becoming a real bone of contention because a lot of things at Silverstone are great. A lot of things haven't got better. Travel in and out of the circuit just by its very nature is just an absolute mess. There's one road out, one road in. There were huge queues in the mud for the park and ride that goes to either Northampton or to Milton Keynes. So I think a lot of people go and they feel like, yeah, maybe the racing itself was worth a lot of money, but the stuff around it, like that, like the Spudman stuff, on top of everything you've already paid, is just it's asking a lot. And the thing that I think annoys a lot of people is the Silverstone management don't, I think, endear themselves to a lot of people, because I don't know if you saw a couple of weeks beforehand, they said, well, no one's buying tickets because Max is dominating at the moment. It's got nothing to do with the prices. And everyone's like, well, might be a bit to do with that. It might also be the fact that it's £400 for a 3-day pass. And I feel for Silverstone in a way, because hosting an F1 race now is becoming so expensive. You've got races like Vegas being able to come in, and a lot of the Middle Eastern races that can pay insane amounts of money, and Formula One can turn around and say, all right, well, we're upping the price for other venues. So it's part of a bigger problem. But yeah, there was lots of complaints about it. And actually, I was stuck in traffic leaving the circuit, and I heard somebody complaining to a marshal, I spent nearly £600 this weekend and I can't even move my car. And the guy was like, I don't know. Like, this poor marshal was like, I didn't set the prices. He was just trying to direct the traffic out. So I think there was quite a bit of frustration there. And but I think I've heard complaints about Silverstone tickets every year I've gone, just which sums up, it always seems to be slightly ahead of where people think it should be. But yeah, certainly one of the more dear races to get to cost wise. I'd argue it's one of the best races you could cover as well, like or attend as a fan. Austin's similar to that. I think the prices there are quite high.
Mm-hmm.
But then you are going to Austin and you're getting the whole race experience. So a tough one. And I sympathize with people. And I wouldn't spend £7 on a potato, or £4.50 on a Red Bull as well is quite remarkable.
Yeah, $7.50 on a potato. I think you're right. That's the headline from the weekend. Lewis Hamilton is the subhead because I don't know how many dollars it is, but it's at least $9, and that's a lot of dollars.
For a potato, that's a lot of it's a lot of dollars.
Okay, let's move on to the rest of the grid for a little bit. So, how many points do we think Max Verstappen will win the Drivers' Championship by?
Well, it's a good, we were trying to work this out. I actually think it's going to be less than what he's on now. I think that we're in a position, hopefully, where if McLaren can get their act together, they should win more races. And Mercedes hopefully can win a couple as well. Maybe Ferrari can get themselves back in the mix. And what hopefully we start to see is Lando or one of the other drivers chipping away at that lead. But I think it's still going to be kind of 50 plus, because the other thing that we have to give credit for is, even when Max doesn't have the quickest car, he's still able to come through the field like he did at Silverstone and finish second. So I think it's going to be, I'm being very optimistic that it's going to be less than, I think he's on an 84 now.
Right, it's 84 right now.
Between 50 and 84, I would happily go with. But you could easily make the prediction of 100 plus, because it's Max, because because Red Bull just get it so good, and the teams like Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren just have this habit of dropping points here and there. So what do you think? Do you think am I being conservative?
No, I think 100. I think I could easily see it being over 100. But yeah, right now Norris is in second. So Max has 255 points as of recording this. Norris has 171, and then there's Leclerc and Sainz are kind of neck and neck right now, around 150, 146, and then Piastri, Perez, Russell, Hamilton, all way underneath with a little over 100 points, 110 points. So yeah, I think if things stay equal, and that includes like the strategy decisions from McLaren and Ferrari don't improve, the Red Bull car doesn't improve, but Max stays as good as he's been. Yeah, I think that I think things will kind of be around where they're at now. If not, Max has a little bit of an advantage there, because I think you're spot on. Like, as rough as it looked for Red Bull at times this weekend, I think Max Verstappen absolutely had a ridiculously good race. And if you put another driver in that car, I'm not sure if they finish in second place.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that is ultimately And I think we saw it with Lewis at points as well, when, especially in 21, making that fight with Max. It's really nice when you see a guy who's had the dominant car for so long have to fight for the wins, because you realize a guy like Max is just so good. And I completely agree with you. I think that car, I know that, again, McLaren probably should have had two cars up there, but Max was so quick towards the end of that race. And he was the first one to go onto the inters of the leading guys. So it shows you his where his mind is at, where his talent is at, where his confidence at. It's perfect. So yeah, it makes it unfair on those chasing guys, but that's ultimately why Max is winning so many championships.
For sure. I think that you also saw this weekend two really experienced drivers, and two of the best drivers, Max and Lewis Hamilton, know and have the correct instincts for taking those stops and putting on the inters versus not putting on the inters. There was a moment where they told Lewis to come in and he said, no, the track is still too dry. And then you saw on the flip side of that, Lando Norris being asked, like, which tires do you want? And I don't even know
not
if
knowing. Yeah,
not knowing.
Like, you guys decide almost.
They probably should decide though, right? Like they have
Yeah.
more information than him. Why do you think that they left that call up to him?
I have no idea, because you're right. There's so much going on there's so much going on for a driver, and you're completely right. I mean, the pit wall there has all the information. They can kind of make a decision, not just on the pit wall. I think people forget that those big teams, they're talking to their bases back in the UK as well. And they're running it by people that would literally be sat watching a race in a room somewhere in their factory and being like, right, we think this is the best option here. And after the race, for that call, Toto Wolff said, we thought McLaren made the worst pick of the three they could have gone on to tire wise. And it just seemed like they panicked in the situation. They thought Lewis is here, Lewis is up there. And yeah, and unless you're saying to a driver, this is literally either of these calls is right, but which one do you feel more comfortable on? Then I can understand it. But with Lando, clearly McLaren knew the soft tire wasn't going to be the one they were going to be the best on. So giving that choice to him, and then him kind of not really giving a decisive answer. I think the transcript was Hamilton, let's cover Hamilton. And then it was like a 2-second pause. And he said, well, what do you guys think? I'm happy to do whatever. And it's kind of like, that's the last thing you want to hear, because it just muddies the water even further. So that's where McLaren should have said, we're putting you on the medium. Like, let's live and die by this decision. And I think that I know, and I know we'll come properly into McLaren now, but I don't know how you feel about this, Jess, but I think ultimately that's the biggest thing. And I think you can see it with Ferrari as well. It seems to be the biggest thing that holds them back a lot of the time is they don't have the guts to kind of make a call and willing to be wrong on it. They're so worried about getting it wrong that they often make the wrong call by indecision. Right. Mercedes and Red Bull are like, we're doing this. And if it goes wrong after the race, they're like, we thought it was the right call and it didn't come off.
Right. Like putting the hards on the Mercedes all the time, when it's like, it feels like that's never the right move. Like how many times have you seen Lewis Hamilton peter out at the end of a race with the wrong tires? But you're exactly right. They're decisive about it, at least.
Yes, exactly. And they're kind of like, okay, yeah, we made the wrong call today, but we made the call. And I think McLaren, they got themselves into their heads a bit too much. And that's now 4 or 5 races I think they could have won. So pretty alarming if you're them.
Yeah, there's a lot of could have, would have, should have for McLaren over the last 3 races in particular. And the other thing was that call for Lando came towards the end of the race. And that was after they had already totally botched Oscar Piastri's chances of winning or finishing on the podium. So I guess, where do you rank those in terms of which was the more costlier choice for McLaren? Was it not double stacking with Piastri and Lando to put on the inters or take off the wait, I'm getting my bits confused.
I did this earlier, so I wrote about this yesterday, and I had to go back through and be like, right, it was dry, rain, dry, or was it wet? Was it rain, dry, rain? I couldn't remember. So much had happened in the 24 hours. So it was coming onto the intermediates the first time. The rain came down. Perez and Leclerc went early, were in their races.
Correct. And then the Mercedes came in and they brought Lando in and left Oscar out. Okay. That's right. So yeah, which screw up do you think was more costly for them? Because Oscar ended up finishing the race pretty quick, but was out of the podium.
Yeah, I would say the Oscar one. And the reason I'd say that is because I think that actually where McLaren went wrong is they didn't anticipate the changeover at the end of the race like Lewis Hamilton did. Mercedes went to the softs a lap earlier. And I think that lap actually, regardless of what Norris had done and what tire they'd put him on, probably would have been at least enough for him to come out behind Lewis. Now, maybe he would have had more of a chance of getting back past him. But the Piastri one, I just didn't think there was an excuse for that at all, because where we were sat in the media center, all you had to do was look to your right out of the window and you're like, well, it's clearly raining very hard now. It's clearly not the time to stay a whole lap on soft tires. And yeah, they again, I just don't know. Are you trying to hedge your bets there? Or are you like, oh, we'll keep one out and we'll put the other in? And Mercedes, they're kind of the kings of the double stack, aren't they? They've always just said, we'll double stack it. And I remember I spoke to a Mercedes engineer once about this like mindset, and he said, I think that the good thing with a double stack is you're owning the delay. Like if you hold one car up for 10 seconds, you can say to him, well, look, we made what was the right call for both the cars. The drawback was there was the delay for you, but the delay would have been greater had you stayed a lap out
Hmm.
and then come in when there was no teammate in front of you. You would have lost so much more time. And Piastri, I think when he came into the pits, Lando was already 5 seconds behind him for that on that one lap because
Hmm.
he'd been struggling around so much. So that really took Oscar out of it. And the reason I would say a worse decision as well is that when they then messed up the Lando decision, it meant they didn't have Oscar in to kind of
Right.
pick up the pieces. They'd basically taken both cars out of victory contention. So both pretty bad. But yeah, if you had to pick one, I would say Oscar. But I think there's a good argument to make that both were
Yeah.
terrible.
Well, there's also the aspect of Lando's last pit stop too was pretty slow and it
Yeah.
was poorly timed and like all of it went to shit pretty quickly for him. So he was,
Yeah.
I mean, you saw him after the race. He seemed really, really upset. He seemed like he felt like he should have won the race. He did not want to talk in the driver's cool down room, even though it sounded like Max Verstappen was like trying to host a podcast back there. He kept trying to like
Yeah.
engage Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris, and both of them were Lewis was like completely like coming down from like his whole emotional experience of winning, and then Lando was just kind of like in a daze, it felt like.
When there was a great moment in there, I'm not sure if you saw it, when you're right, Max was kind of trying to hold court and be like, guys, how was your race? And then Lewis kind of turned to Lando and was like, I think, oh, he's like, oh, did you pit one lap too late? And Lando was like, yeah, yeah. And he said, you went on the softs? And Lando was like, yeah. And he said, didn't you have
Ugh.
a medium? And Lando just puts his leg up on the chair and is like, yeah. Like
Yeah,
immediately is like, yeah, we
poking
did
the
it.
bear.
Lewis is kind of like, oh, okay. And like obviously he doesn't know the story of the race behind him at that point, I guess. But yeah, Lando, I mean, we're seeing that more and more now. I thought the breakout win for Lando in Miami would kind of be a big turning point for McLaren because I
Hmm.
felt like they'd overthought things since Sochi so much, and it can really get into your
Yeah.
psyche not winning races. And actually now they're making blunders quite often, and he's making some mistakes, like with Spain, that slow start. They've got the they've just not been perfect with the strategy a few times, and you've got to be at a really high level to beat Red Bull or beat Mercedes at the moment. And yeah, I felt for him at the end because he would have been looking at Lewis celebrating with the British flag,
Yeah.
lapping up the crowd reaction, and he would have been thinking one thing, and that's I should be doing that. That should be me
Yeah.
right now. And that
Yeah,
must
there
be
was
such a gutting feeling to have at your home race.
for sure. There was a lot of papaya in the crowd too. I mean, when you
Yeah,
looked like out in the crowd shots, it was a lot of like the Lewis Hamilton yellow Mercedes hats that
yeah.
kind of stick out, and then a lot of the McLaren stuff.
The thing that was interesting was in qualifying, I went down to the TV pen just before the last laps, and there was a moment when Lewis put it on pole provisionally, really, really big cheer. Lando then beat him, and I would say there was a bigger cheer from the crowd. It was really loud. And then Russell crossed, and it was like, have you seen that TikTok where it's like, hooray? It's like, so like people were kind of happy, but it was like really like, oh,
Oh,
George's up.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like it was kind of, you could tell the hierarchy of who the Brits'
Yeah,
favorites
the
were there. But yeah, Lando I think had
Dabadoo.
had more, if not, sorry, the same if not more fans
Yeah.
at home than Lewis. It feels like the tide has turned in the UK in terms of who the most popular driver is. So it will really sting him, I think, for a long time.
Oh, for sure. I think it also from a fan perspective and also like a commentary perspective, this season it went so quickly from he finally won his first race, like, oh, thank God, like
Yeah,
Lando, he's such a bright future, to like, oh, he should have won at least a couple more by now, which obviously it's very hard to win them. It's
yeah.
not easy to put all the pieces together, but yeah, it's given how close they've really been and how big the mistakes have been, I think he's definitely kicking himself. And that I think that change happened super quickly for McLaren, and now the pressure is on.
It is. And I think the mindset changes immediately after Miami, which was we should win races. And you think Imola, and I've written about this recently, so that's why the stats are all right in the top of my mind. But Imola, it was like zero point 0.2 seconds behind Max. And he
Hmm.
said if I'd qualified pole, I would have won the
Just five
race.
more, yeah, just five more
Yeah,
laps, I would have caught up. Yeah, right.
exactly. And if he'd qualified ahead, I think he probably would have won the race because
Hmm.
it's hard to overtake there. Canada, obviously, McLaren didn't quite make the timing of that safety car. Cool work for them. You had obviously Austria, him and Max collided. And I'm missing one other.
Spain.
Spain, where he was on pole, starts badly, loses the race. each one of those, there's probably one moment where they didn't get it right. And Piastri said to us on Sunday, he said, the annoying thing about the race is we got every other call completely perfect. The pit stops were perfect, but we made one call badly. And he was talking about his own race, and you could say the same about Lando. And ultimately, that one call took both of them out of the race for the victory. So shows you can get everything right, and you screw up the big things, and you're not going to win races. So McLaren need to sort that out, because this year might be too far gone. But I feel like for 25, McLaren can't be like this and win a championship. You've got to be taking wins when they're there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're kind of like at that point a little bit with Ferrari now too, because Charles Leclerc was, he won in Monaco. The car has looked pretty quick all year, but has struggled in races still. And so now after this weekend, I mean, what do you do with them? Like he seems totally despondent. He seems like he's once again lost faith in the world and humanity and Formula One. Who do we blame for his race this weekend?
It's remarkable, isn't it? I mean, if you compare the quotes after Monaco and the quotes after Silverstone, and you said they're 4 or 5 weeks apart, you wouldn't believe it. There was such a high, and it's remarkable. And I think the thing that Ferrari have found the most frustrating is they were the team that were closest to Red Bull at the start of the year, and they've dropped off. And I actually think Monaco, in a weird way, was an unhelpful. It's always great to win a race. You're never going to not want to win a race, but I think kind of outside of Ferrari, it made people think, oh, Ferrari are on a great trajectory. But obviously, Monaco is such a unique circuit. Winning there doesn't really mean you're improving at the other places. And while we've seen McLaren get better, Mercedes get better, Ferrari they don't seem comfortable. The setup isn't quite there. I think they're going down a lot of dead ends like Mercedes were. And Charles is just so frustrated because I think he sees what's happening with Lando. He sees Mercedes back up there, and he's only got what is it, 6 wins to his name in his career. And I think
That's crazy.
it's just, which is mad. It's crazy.
It's partially because Max has been like Lewis said, he's such a ball hog. Like he's
I think Max has got 65 or something like that now, which is just insane. But if you're Charles, you're looking at that and you're like, man, because I think everything this year is in the context of, can we challenge for the championship next season? And if you're Charles Leclerc right now, you're probably thinking, well, we need to catch up, and then we need to kind of take another step for 25. And that seems like a daunting task at the moment. So yeah, he seems really lost. His quote, I forget the quote, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but he said, this is worse than a nightmare or something. And I was just like, I can't believe we're back to this Ferrari again, where Charles just seems like he needs a big hug from someone.
Oh man.
So yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Worse than a nightmare was what he said.
That's it. Worse than a nightmare.
Been 4 races, it's been worse than a nightmare. And he also did the I don't even know what to say anymore, which is never
which exactly. You're like, I don't want to hear this ever again. So yeah, that's pretty gutting.
Yeah, wow. It's definitely as like some teams are doing this, maybe other teams are doing this, and I'm doing an up and a down thing if you're listening to this on the podcast right now. But one of the teams that's actually been doing this, like the going up this season, has been the Haas, and I wonder if you have any sort of theories on what that is all about, because Nico Hülkenberg's been racing really, really well, and they could actually finish, I think, ahead of the Aston, perhaps, in the constructors by the end of the season, which I don't know if anyone expected when the season started.
No, it's a great example of under promise and over deliver in a massive way. So I think at the start of the year, the press release we got, it was about a week after Gunther Steiner had left. There's a lot of questions about what's going to happen with this team. Ai Komatsu said, look, if we can just finish 10th with a few points this year, we'll be pretty happy. And everyone's like, what kind of ambition is that? But I think it was the right thing to do because it was such an uncertain period. Haas have brought a few upgrades that were kind of holdovers from last season. And Komatsu's obviously come up from the technical department. So I think he had a good gauge on where the team was going, the direction they were headed. And the last 2 things they brought to the car have just seemed to work. And to his credit, Nico Hülkenberg right now looks like an absolute superstar. I mean, I know he came back after a few years out, but he's just getting the most out of that package at the moment. And yeah, I think it's a great story because I really like the Haas team. I know a lot of people said without Steiner, it's not quite the same, but it's kind of that plucky little team at the back of the grid.
But if they're good, I mean, I think it makes up for the fact that they don't have him as the face of the team anymore, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Winning covers up for a lot of sins.
And let's be honest, as much as I love Gunther, the results weren't there in the last couple of years, right? So I think that, if you're a Haas fan or employee, you're like, well, this is way better than what we had before.
Yeah, absolutely. But they're right now behind RB. I still don't know what to call RB. I'm just gonna call them RB, Visa Cash App RB. So what can you share with us about some of the Checo Red Bull rumors that I've been reading about over the last week?
So the last three races, and this is sometimes what's funny about Formula One having a triple header, is that everyone's in the paddock together a lot, and you basically have
Gossiping?
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, just basically gossiping with people, and you start to hear journalists have a bit of information here and there. The mood at Red Bull around Perez definitely changed over this past kind of three race run. Before that, it was like, look, he's just lacking a bit of confidence. He'll get back to it. He always does after we give him a new contract. The last three races, I think, have been so alarming. We were talking about Haas just now. Nico Hulkenberg has outscored Perez in the last five races, which is crazy. There's no world in which that should ever be even remotely close to being true. And now Red Bull, I think, they're in a real conundrum. And I kind of think it's a conundrum of their own making as well, because you've got Perez in terrible form, McLaren on the rise, Mercedes on the rise. They're suddenly looking over their shoulder and thinking the constructors does look like the championship that could be wide open. I know that they've got a big gap in that, but it's quite easy to quickly get points, taken off your opponent in that championship. And Perez just he's not scoring good points. But there's also conversations about, well, Daniel Ricciardo's not exactly been that impressive. And the reason he was brought back initially was to be this safety net for Perez. And actually, for Red Bull, both those drivers have been underwhelming. Now, I don't know whether Yuki Tsunoda has done something nasty to like one of Helmut Marko's gym bags, or has got some incriminating information on someone at Red Bull, but he never seems in the equation to make that step up.
Totally, yeah.
So, which is bizarre, but the way I've had it explained to me is they just don't think mentally he has the temperament to race in an environment alongside Max, which, maybe you need that. But then again, I don't think anyone on the grid seems to be up to that. So there's this test with Liam Lawson on Thursday. Obviously, Lawson stepped in for Ricciardo at 3 races last year. Now, if you talk to some people at Red Bull, they're saying, well, we're evaluating Lawson to see if he can replace Ricciardo. Some people say, well, we're seeing if he can replace Perez. If he's good enough, we might put him in there. Obviously, that's a huge risk, but it tells you where the company is, not just with Red Bull, with Perez right now, but also where they are with Ricciardo. And I just think if Ricciardo's form was better, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I think they already would have said, right, Ricciardo, you're back in, welcome back to the team. Great story. Let's, the fire's still burning within him. I think there's a real question mark about his kind of, temperament at the moment, where he is confidence wise, where he is form wise. And they're in a real mess. And to me personally, as much as I like Liam Lawson as a guy, I'm not convinced whether he's the person you want to drop in this situation either, because you could damage him long term just for a short term situation. But all of the rumors and rumblings you're hearing are based on a lot of truth.
They're real. Okay.
But it's just what Red Bull do with it, I have no idea. But I think Perez has 2 races to basically get 2 podiums, and if he doesn't, I think in the summer break, that's the big news story. And even if he does, there's one person I spoke to at Red Bull. It wasn't Christian Horner, but it was somebody, pretty senior in another department. And he said, even if he does get 2 podiums, that doesn't mean anything. He's got podiums before and then has spiraled again. So I think now the kind of the trust factor with Perez has gone. As popular as he is within the team, it's just there's no confidence that he's sustainably gonna be in form, which makes you wonder why they gave him a contract in the first place, because this isn't like it's just happened. Right. So that's what I meant about it being a self-made problem. So I kind of feel like Red Bull have walked themselves into this in a big way. But yeah, it's a real mess, and I think it could cost them the constructors, because he's just left so many points on the table, and that would be a disaster given where their car started the year. That shouldn't even be a conversation. It should be dead and buried, I think, already.
Oh, absolutely. So, if my maths is correct, Perez has only scored 15 points since Miami, which was all the way back the first week of May.
That's correct.
His last podium was in China, and right now the Red Bull team is only 71 points ahead of Ferrari, and Ferrari and McLaren are pretty close together. They're around 300 points apiece in the constructors, and obviously both have drivers that are capable of finishing in the top 10, which Perez just hasn't really been able to do very much lately.
I mean, he finished behind Hulkenberg in Austria. He was way off the pace. They got his strategy wrong, with the call, but he was nowhere anyway, was he? He was out of the top 10. He'd had that spin in qualifying at Silverstone, and that's a really key point that the last podium was China, because obviously that was the last race where Red Bull were in a different planet to everyone else. Right after that is when McLaren kind of came back into their own. We've obviously seen the gap has come down since then. And he just, while Max has been able to deliver very, very solid results, and he's like, okay, well, we're not winning races, I'm still going to be second and third. I think the only time since Miami that Max hasn't been on the podium was Monaco, I'm pretty sure. Oh, and Austria, was he fourth
He
then?
finished fifth, I believe.
Finished fifth. Okay, so one was with a collision and one was Monaco, which is kind of an outlier. Otherwise, he's done really well at other races to maximize the result. Perez just hasn't done that. So really alarming for them. And it's a shame as well, because I really like Perez, and he's a great driver. But I think ultimately driving against Max Verstappen is just so taxing on a lot of people. And it just seems to have this impact. Was he the third driver that this has happened to? So I think whoever Red Bull put in there, it's all well and good putting like a Lawson in there. You have to make sure you're protecting them from kind of the beat down that Max is going to give them on a weekly basis, because drivers are very proud people. They think they're the best driver in the world, and suddenly you put them in a car with a guy who, let's face it, probably is the best driver in the world right now, and he's so good. Very quickly, whether it's Lawson, whether it's Ricardo, whether it's Sonoda, maybe gets an unlikely call up there. I think the same thing happens down the line. So, yeah, and all of this happening when Carlos Sainz is on the market as well. Let's not forget. So, I always wonder why he wasn't more of an option. Maybe now he will be. I don't know, but a lot of people wondering why he has delayed that conversation and that decision. I think we're starting to see why now. I don't think he's ever been convinced that Perez is a long-term option for Red Bull, and that's starting to prove itself to be the case.
That was going to kind of be my second follow-up question, is that Carlos Sainz is still out there. But just as an aside, it doesn't seem like, other than Verstappen, Red Bull has really had a great strategy for managing any of the four drivers that have been on the grid. I guess three drivers, I should say, other than Max. But yeah, Carlos is still out there. He still hasn't signed anything. Some spots are filling up. Haas has officially announced that Ollie Behrman will be racing for them next year. So, I mean, what's the holdup on Carlos Sainz? We talked about this when you were on weeks ago, and you said that he was like the first domino to fall, and that domino is still standing.
It's still sat there. Yeah,
it has not even like wiggled a little bit.
Well, Kevin Magnussen came up with a better way of describing it a few weeks back. You probably saw. He said he's the cork in the bottle. He's holding everything up.
Yes.
And it is quite remarkable, really, because he's got these three offers. And so I think when we spoke, I was talking about it being between Audi and between Williams, who seemed like a left field, and it was like, well, Audi's probably the call. Williams seems to have become a lot more serious now, and at the same time, Alpine, I think, have got themselves in there. And like I mentioned, I think he is kind of looking over at Red Bull and being like, well, look, like, if you want to give me a 2-year deal, why not? And I think from Sainz's point of view as well, the fact that there's still this ongoing thing about, will Max go to Mercedes down the line? There's obviously a lot of benefit in tying yourself down to a long-term contract with Red Bull right now as well. So I think there's a lot of that in his mind, and Sainz has played it really well, I think, because they're all pretty bad options, other than if you not including Red Bull, but the actual legitimate options he has in front of him. Short term, they're not great. And they're all willing to wait for him. He's kind of leveraging the reputation he has right now in the driver market to wait and have them wait for him, which I think is smart. He actually admitted to us before the race at Silverstone on the Thursday. Someone asked him, "This must be distracting for you," and he said, "Yeah, I'll be honest, it is, because I'm just spending so many times having calls and looking at contracts and having discussions with people." So I think he wants to get it done, but this is the time of year that usually you would be making this decision anyway. So in a normal season, he's kind of on schedule. It's just the fact that everything else has happened so quickly that it suddenly
because of Lewis Hamilton, I think. Lewis Hamilton started this.
And by taking his seat as well, just for added insult to injury. Like, not only took Carlos's seat, but accelerated all the other decisions so much that Carlos has to make one quickly. But yeah, I hope he makes one soon, and I actually hope that he somehow ends up in that Red Bull seat next year.
That would be fun.
It would, because he's one of we mentioned the four drivers: Ricardo, Gasly, Albon, and Perez, that have been teammates of Max. Carlos was his teammate at Toro Rosso in their first season together, but they never raced together at Red Bull. And I actually think Sainz coming in there, given the form he's been on with McLaren, the fact with McLaren, I'm back in 2019, the form he's been on since he left McLaren to go to Ferrari, I think he'd be great there, and I think that he's so sure of himself and confident. I think it'd actually relish that opportunity to race against Max again. And that's where I think Red Bull have really messed this up, because obviously Carlos Sainz, it's not like he's just suddenly become available. He's been available since the end of January, and they've had to make this decision. And Perez, they signed him to a deal, and I think a lot of people were just like, well, what on earth have you done that for? And I know that Sainz and his dad and his agent were all just like, I can't believe Red Bull have just renewed this guy again. So we'll see how that plays out. Obviously, contracts can be torn up, and Red Bull are quite good at doing that as well. So we'll see how that plays out. But that obviously Sainz wouldn't be able to sign for this season with Red Bull. He'd have to do it for next year. The actual shorter term for Red Bull is a bit harder to work out. But they've got themselves in that mess, and I hope Sainz is the answer to it longer term. But we'll see.
Well, you mentioned Sainz and McLaren, which made me think of Carlos and Lando's friendship back in the day. And last weekend, Meg Schuster came on and we talked a little bit about if we thought Lando and Max's friendship was going to be damaged after Austria. But it seemed like whenever all the drivers showed up for media on Thursday, the two of them have patched it up. So I wanted to give that little update. It seems like Lando kind of walked back his immediate anger from after the race. It sounded like Max did apologize. Did a I'm sorry, mate, or something of that sort. But I thought the most interesting thing was that Lewis Hamilton was asked what he thought about the whole incident and if this was a Max problem or an F1 problem. And this was his response to that question.
Can I come to you now? You've had many close battles with Max Verstappen. What did you make of what happened between Lando and him last weekend in Austria?
Nothing really. I didn't think anything of it. I was more concerned about my race and enjoying the team's win.
Well, you've told us in the past that you treat Max differently on track. So what advice could you give to Lando about going wheel to wheel with Max?
Again, I don't think I need to. They've raced each other for many years, so yeah.
You're not going to be drawn on this, are you?
That's nothing to do with me.
All right. Well, look,
one of the best non-answers of all time.
Yeah. A career in politics beckons for Lewis Hamilton. Who knew?
Seriously, I loved his re-answer. He's like, this has nothing to do with me. Don't drag me into this. And all the other drivers sitting on the couch with him are just awkwardly like looking away, tucking in their shirts, trying not to make eye contact.
Yeah, it was I was actually in that press conference. I was just because I'd just come back from another session, was in the media center just as that question was asked. And I was looking at the screens and you couldn't quite make out the reaction of everyone. But yeah, I imagine being in that room was quite interesting. I've got to say, on the Thursday arriving at Silverstone, we, you know what it's like in the media. We were all kind of foaming at the mouth, like, right,
oh, yeah.
Max v Lando, once friends, now enemies type thing. And it just, every driver was like, no, I don't really see what the fuss was about. You know, it was kind of, it was kind of Max on the line, but he's like that. And Lando was the really interesting one because he really rolled that back and said, look, we're still mates. Max, actually, to his credit, was like, I was more worried about losing a friendship with Lando than I was losing a win. And I was actually kind of like, in the heat of all of that, trying to us create this narrative, I was like, it's actually kind of refreshing to see two guys, especially with Max, who's like, ultimately, I don't care that much to ruin this friendship with this guy that I've known for a long time. Not the best headline for a piece, but
very
actually
humanizing,
kind of,
though. Yeah,
exactly. Very humanizing and very refreshing. But I do think that next time they come wheel to wheel in that situation, I don't think there's any reason that Max behaves any differently now. Lando's kind of backed away from it a bit, and Lewis was really smart in 21. Obviously we were just at Silverstone, like the scene of the crime in 2021.
Yeah, right.
But that was him basically saying, "I'm not letting you race against me like this. Here's my line. If you're gonna, and so I'm really curious to see how Lando races like that. But I think that response, as much as I do believe Max and Lando are friends again, I think in Max's head as well, he's like, I can beat this guy. I can. This is how I beat him. So I think that dynamic to it will play out the next time they come wheel to wheel, whenever that may be.
And Lewis, I'm certain, has a lot of opinions on it, but he's just like, I'm not. And I would love to hear his unfiltered point of view. But yeah, I think Lando overtook Max early in the race this past weekend, but he had such an advantage. Max, it wasn't really the same like wheel.
That's right. It was like a DRS overtake. Just one on Lewis that's interesting with him is he's currently in the process of making a documentary. I think it's Apple that are making his. So I do feel like a lot of the time now he's waiting. He's saving all of his best opinions for that. Because he's like, I'm not giving you guys my best opinions. I'm controlling the narrative. And also it's fair as well, because you say something in a press conference off the cuff, people can go wild with the headline. They can, we can discuss it on podcasts.
Well, that's what we did last weekend after Austria. We were
Yeah,
like, oh my
exactly.
God, Lando and
Yeah,
Max it's
yeah,
over. They're never going to play
yeah.
paddle together ever again.
Yeah, paddle court owners across the world were like, damn, we can't have those two players.
No.
And now it just seems like it's fine. So I do wonder with Lewis whether there's some of that there, and those things will come out eventually. But
That's
you can tell from
interesting.
that grin that we just saw for people who watched it, you could tell he definitely had stuff he wanted to say. He wasn't gonna give anyone the satisfaction of actually saying what he thought.
Yeah, that's years of like very tactical PR work and
Yeah,
communications
a lot of therapy that's gone into
yeah,
that moment.
that too. Yeah. Okay, well, last thing, since you mentioned Apple and you mentioned the documentary, I was like, oh, do you mean the Brad Pitt one with
Yeah.
but no, that is not a documentary. That is a movie that is being filmed right now in and amidst the paddock. They filmed a lot of scenes last year during Silverstone, excuse me. And Brad Pitt was walking around during interviews and stuff. I'm sure you probably saw him all weekend, right?
Yes, we did. So he was filming. It was actually really, I found it really amazing to see, as just someone. Obviously, all of us go and watch movies when we can, but yeah, they were in the TV pen after qualifying and after the race, where Brad Pitt would do a couple of run throughs of walking to a camera, which was obviously set up by Apple. They had two other cameras there, and they were filming a scene live as they did it. And there was another actor there playing a journalist, or one of the written journalists. He was dressed had like a flat cap on. He looked like he was from the 80s. And I think he steps in, and I think he makes like a wager with Brad Pitt. And then obviously, I assume
Oh.
the wager comes to be true later in the movie. But Fernando Alonso actually was hanging around the pen, and we all noticed that he, during that scene, kept going over and patting Brad Pitt on the back and going, "Nice job." So definitely there's a cameo in there from Fernando
Oh my
Alonso,
gosh.
which would be
That's
kind of cool.
great. That would be cool. I did see a video of like Brad Pitt walking around and Fernando Alonso just turns and stares at him.
Yeah, so that scene, so that moment is just before, and then he goes over, pats him on the back, and is like, "Good job today," or something. He's like that, and then he came around to talk to us, and I was like, "Were you just acting with Brad Pitt?" And he gave like a Fernando Alonso kind of like nod and a
Smirk.
wink, and was like, he just said, "Did you like it?" And I was like, "I mean, yeah, look, it looked okay. I mean, what, you know." But yeah,
I feel like go ahead.
I feel like the whole process has been really, really different for Formula One. There was a time when Formula One didn't let anyone come into the paddock at all, and suddenly they're giving Apple unfettered access. I don't know what you made of the trailer. We can talk about the kind of the ropey dialogue at the beginning, but I
Yes.
thought the racing scenes look amazing, and like the visor cams, a lot of that was filmed at Silverstone last year. So I think that from a visual point of view, it'll be interesting, but I'm worried about like the bit of dialogue that we
plot?
got. Yeah, the plot itself. I mean,
Okay,
who knows?
we're totally on the same page. All right, let's just watch like the first few seconds of this trailer.
Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston, now McLaren, all have a speed on the straights. Our shot is battling in the turns. We need to build our car for combat.
How am I supposed to make that safe?
Who said anything about safe?
So yes, that opening dialogue is like really the only dialogue in the trailer, and it was immediately like, ooh, I don't think
Well, it's
that.
just we got to build a car for combat. I mean, I get what he's saying, but it's very hammed up. Which I guess, hey, it is a Hollywood movie, right?
Yeah,
It's
of
got to
course.
have some stuff in. Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, if it's all like that, there's a few TikToks I saw of people doing impressions of Brad Pitt when he's like, I bet there's a scene in it where he's like, they talk a lot of languages in Formula One: Italian, Spanish, English, Portuguese. There's only one, but there's only one language on the track, and he's like eating an apple. And he's like, what language is that, Scott? And then someone off camera is like, speed.
Speed,
Yeah,
yep.
and it's like you can imagine that kind of thing. So we'll see. We actually had a briefing during the week about the movie, and I'm excited. I think a lot of people are going to go to it who haven't seen Formula One before, or have a very vague understanding of it. And I think the fact they're using real life drivers, obviously Steiner had a cameo on it, like leaning
Yes.
over the pit wall. I think there'll be enough cameos in there that it will make it pretty fun. I do get the impression it feels like a big marketing film because they use the title, they use the logo as well, which
Yes.
we had a lot of debates about when we we're at the Silverstone Media Center. I'd love to know what you think about it, but for me, I'm like, they must be able to come up with a better title than F1. But then again, everyone's going to say, well, have you seen the F1 movie? It's perfect from
You
that
might
point
as
of view.
well. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, people are just going to call it the F1 movie, regardless of
Yeah.
what you name it. I think your point about the cameos is spot on. People will watch it just to be like the Leonardo DiCaprio, like point at the screen thing every time.
Yeah.
Fernando Alonso, the Gunther Steiner frame in the trailer is perfect. I like already I'm like, oh, I'm so glad he gets a cameo in this. But the title, yeah, it's not even that it's just called F1. It's that they're using the logo, the trademarked F1 logo.
Yeah.
And so I think that alone tells you this movie is going to make Formula One look awesome. Hopefully not at the expense of like an actual cool storyline or a plot, but we didn't get to see what any of that might be from the trailer. I know I've read like a 2-sentence blurb about what the storyline is before the trailer came out, but like it really doesn't tell you very much. So
Yeah.
I don't know what to expect. I hope it's good. I definitely am rooting for it to be a good movie because I love good sports movies. There's just not a lot of them. It's hard to do it.
It really is. And I think that the one thing I have hope about is the fact that there's been complete buy-in from the teams. Because I think Lewis Hamilton himself said it. He said there's not any good racing movies, which I would say, well, there's Cars. And there's Days of Thunder, which is fantastic, but it's obviously a NASCAR movie. But it's so difficult to get racing right, I think. You know, when you see a lot of sports movies, a bad sports movie is terrible. You know, if you get it right, it's very, if you get it right, it's perfect. But if you get it wrong, I think it's really wrong. You know, you see like growing up in the UK, you see when movies try and have scenes, soccer scenes where they're kind of passing the ball to each other. And you're like, oh, this just looks awful. It just looks terrible. So it's really easy to get wrong. So hopefully they haven't. And yeah, I'm staying optimistic. I might just mute the dialogue at certain points.
Right. Watch the racing. I think, exactly. for sure. Like I think Spencer and I have some like, when we're having a slower week, we're going to do some F1 movie watching, maybe watch the Ferrari movie, which I haven't seen yet, or some of the other ones that have come out. But you're right. There's not a ton of really great ones. The Senna documentary is probably the best F1 movie, but it's a completely different genre. Yeah. It's a documentary and it's awesome.
Rush is really good. So,
Rush was okay. Ford versus Ferrari, I'm not going to lie, I fell asleep. It was really long.
Yeah, the Ferrari movie I did see, the more recent one,
the Adam Driver one.
Yeah, it had moments, but yeah, it was one where I was like, I don't know, I just left. But again, maybe that's coming from a more of a racing background. Maybe if you're not from that, you find it really interesting, and that's also fine. Not every movie is gonna satisfy every person, so we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely, and I'm excited for Hans Zimmer. I think that the purpose of the movie, I'm sure, is to get more new fans to watch the actual races. So as long as it looks cool and sounds good, I'm sure it'll get the job done. But I'm eager to see what it is. It'll be out next summer, so there's a long wait ahead of us.
Long wait indeed. And I mean, Fernando Alonso, maybe after he's done Formula One, he'll be an actor. Who knows? That could be the springboard for him.
It seems like he would be perfect for it. But okay, Nate, thank you so much for joining. That was a lot of fun. If you like the podcast, like and subscribe, rate and review. Spencer will be back for the next show, but there's no show next week because we are all off. Formula One is also off. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the show. And again, Nate, thank you so much. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll be tuning in to hear what Spencer got up to in Mongolia for sure, because we've just had a bunch of great stories here, but I imagine Spencer, Mongolia, those are two things I don't want to miss. So
I can't wait. Yeah, I can't wait to find out what he's doing. He's been gone, it seems like forever. So I can't wait to tell him that George Russell won a race because I'm sure he has no idea.
Yeah, do you reckon he has no idea? He just comes back and thinks Russell won, Hamilton won. That would be amazing coming out of Mongolia and being like, hang on, my phone's broken.
He's just been posting pictures on his Instagram story of his beard like flowing in the wind. So nice. I don't know if he's been watching F1, but we'll find out.
Nice one. Well, thanks so much for having me on. Always love coming on. So thanks.